Welcome back to Ta Titi Talk, a music education podcast. I'm Tyler Swick.
And I'm Jordan Smith.
Today we're going to be talking about equipment, how the year's going, some maybe stories from the past. We like to keep it loose, of course. We have some loose questions that we're going to stay on. But really the goal today is to really figure out how are we dealing with instruments, maybe instrument acquisition, and then are there any current problems getting instruments, even if you have the money. Also, what I'm interested in is maybe diving more into our different school styles, where Jordan teaches private. I'm in a public, though I've attended magnet schools. I don't teach at a magnet school, but the three main differences between these programs. So, Jordan, I know you teach at a private school. Did you attend public schools all the way up before you taught at a private school?
I kind of have an interesting background because I actually went through DoD schools for the Army. So went
And
to
what are
Army
those? Like,
schools.
jump right in. Like, what? Explain all
It's
that.
it's
'Cause I
like
don't know.
their curriculum. Like what I liked about it is the idea is if you move to Texas, you should be on the same page, same curriculum as if you move to another school. So I think it kind of helps keeping kids on track, if that makes sense, just with like the communication. And I've also gone to a public high school. So I've had that opportunity and I've also taught after school at public schools while I'm also teaching at mine, simultaneously seeing the money and the budgets from both. Very different. You would think that, I don't know, one would be
Right.
higher than the other.
Right. And I think there's kind of a misconception that because it costs money to go to a private school, there is more money. And that's maybe a misconception.
Oh yeah, I think it's a huge misconception I even had. It's kind of like college professors that teach at private universities will tell you that high school band directors make more money than they do and that they'll ever make, working at a university. And so I think I had that misconception about private schools. And I thought, okay, well, the teachers maybe don't make as much. And I'll say this, I mean, you make, at least in this area, it could be up to a $10,000 difference, starting pay difference, which is huge for you as a personal matter, with like your money, which I still found myself like paying myself with instruments for my classroom. But yeah, as far as your budget, and don't get me wrong, my school works with me, but my budget's
Right.
$500 for preschool through 8th grade. And everybody
Sure.
knows that's like a musical, some drumsticks, and a high five.
100%. Yeah. And I'll be honest, my there's no running budget for music at my school. So to make you feel better, there's no running budget because a lot of times, and this is just maybe our school district or just these recent times, but since I've been a teacher, budget cuts have been a thing almost every year. So this last resurgence of money from the government to keep schools going has actually been the first boom of money that we've experienced. And I know a lot of that money came out and music teachers were able to possibly get their hands on it. But a lot of it also went to just improving the schools, improving transportation, whatnot. But they're saying it's the largest boost in money ever for public education. And so I'm hoping there's some sort of, I'll say trickle down. I'm really hoping there's a trickle down. I heard some great stories about like band directors getting new band instruments or orchestra teachers getting a whole new set of instruments, just like that money, if the world isn't falling apart otherwise, it could go to nice things. But yeah, in my situation for public school, my budget, when I first became a teacher, they said, here's $100 for the whole school year. When you use it, it's gone. And I was terrified to use it. So I didn't spend a dime because I thought, what if there's an emergency? And year two, they said, oh, you still have last year's $100? Great. You don't need another.
Yeah. Isn't that the worst lesson that they don't teach you in college? Everybody listen to me. Because by the way, we do have college students that listen to us. Learn what a budget is right now and learn that if you don't spend money by the end of the year or a certain time, you lose it. You don't use it, you lose it. Nobody told me that either.
And the funny thing is, like, I've heard the phrase, if you don't use it, you lose it. But I just thought I'd save, because in your real life, they say save that money, put it in the bank, hold on to it, grow your accounts. And anyway, yeah, no, I definitely learned that I could spend that money in August. And then if something came up in January, it would still be paid attention to. Even if the budget was gone, there would kind of be some sort of understanding of like, well, if they'd really need it, the school will help out. But
That's
yeah,
good to know, though.
right. Yeah. It's kind of like, they have a parachute of like, if we give them $100, they'll think they only have $100 to spend. And of course, every school's different, and whoever your administrators are. But since I've moved on to another school, fundraising was so effective that I never had to ask the school for money. So I'm in a situation where there is no music budget, but I fundraise for my accounts, and then I don't have to ask for money. So it's kind of choose your battle, I guess. I work a little bit harder to make the money, but then I never ask for money, and also don't kind of have to get permission of how it's spent. Of course, it goes through a real approval of like, before I hit buy, they have to make sure it's not like candy for the classroom. But they're not going to question, why do you need another ukulele? That doesn't come up. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, see, that's interesting because that seems to be how like the middle school band program worked. It's like you have the rollover accounts. And that was another thing, is me learning, oh, you have two different accounts. This one's like your operating budget, and then this is whatever extra you have that gets to roll over. But I was going to ask, I noticed that I've done this up until probably this year. Did you ever treat that money almost like it was your own? As in, like, you were just as careful with that as you would be with your own money, like wanting to save it to buy nicer things?
Absolutely. And then on top of that, so yes is the answer, because I want nice things for the classroom, because there's this idea of, we'll never get paid enough. That's something we can swallow that pill. We'll never make enough money. So what if we could fill our room with the things that make us happy, so that when you go to work, it's like my music room as opposed to my office. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it makes like a difference.
Totally. So it's like a wild purchase that made me happy every time I see it is a subwoofer. And it's so silly. But we have a PA, and the PA is great, and it's nice and loud. Great. But then the subwoofer was a nice addition, where every time I plug it in, I go, yeah.
It's bumping.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we started plugging it in for movies, and it's like the booms go boomer. And then would plug it in for music, and kids could like feel the bass line in the classroom.
It makes a difference.
100%. And it's one of those deals where it's like, a subwoofer is probably on nobody's wish list for a classroom. And it's made me happy every time I plug it in. And it's so silly, but it's like I get pure joy when it's like really going, and I'm like, that was money well spent.
Yeah, like your ears are like, thank you. You're hearing your money out loud.
Exactly. And then like what it turned into, funny enough, and this is something I didn't even think about, is that once kind of parents and teachers heard this sound system, they kind of started saying, well, when we have our next dance, do we need to hire a DJ, or can we just use this? And I'm like, let's just use this. And then all of a sudden we're saving money on DJs, and it's like it was an investment to get a good sound system and a Spotify playlist. We're not paying $500 an event for a DJ all of a sudden. And it's like, whoa, didn't see that bonus coming.
Well, but there's another side of that. Like, as soon as you said that, it's funny. One of my coworkers texted me the other day. They're like, hey, can we use this for the church movie night? And I'm like, yes, totally. But then now everybody sees what difference that makes. So then it's like everybody around's like, hey, can we borrow that? And I don't mind it as long as like nobody breaks it. Cause like I told you, my equipment is on its last leg. Like you could just blow it over the wrong way or touch it and it could break. Like the CD player doesn't work in it. And I've figured out how to like still put it in a phone by getting the old, what is it, the RCA cables?
Oh, yeah. Because like, new iPhones don't have headphone jacks.
Oh, my gosh.
And I run into that problem on a daily basis.
Yes.
When teachers want music in their event, or let's say we're doing something kind of small, we have this portable speaker. Great, plug your phone in. And then it's like, you need Bluetooth now, because by nobody, I'm thrilled to still have my headphone jack. But I'm going to say the average teacher right now does not have a headphone jack anymore.
I hate it, though, because I feel like whenever these products move at the rate that they're going, they have to remember like education. It's like we're going to stay 10 years behind all of that sometimes for some schools, depending on like, what you get that is updated. Like we got new smart boards right before COVID hit, and it's still like, I don't get to be back in my classroom, and I'm just sitting there I'm like, wow, this thing is so beautiful and nice. Like all the buttons work.
Yeah.
It has this thing called Bluetooth on it, but then none of your other stuff will work with it,
No, that is really interesting about the technology, because it's like you get a technology boom, and let's say you get an upgrade, and you're so happy, and it's not even in your mind that this will not be upgraded for 20 years.
Yeah,
Like, you
like
better like this projector because it's not getting replaced until like somebody hits the lottery.
yeah, and even then, it'll probably be 5% chance of that.
That's
But I mean, I think that's the thing though, is like your equipment definitely can just make you feel it's like your school being clean. You know, like when you walk in somewhere and you're like, this just feels better to be in. But I feel like having equipment that you use often, that's the stuff that you really have to invest in. And it's like, you were saying that for you, it's the subwoofer. And I think it's like, for me, it's always having things that I need ready to go, like very organized, where it's like, I always have a dongle so that I'm not like, oh, who lost this again? And now I've gotten like really aggressive with labeling my things because
right.
I think that at this point in my career, it's very important that things are where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. And that if I could go back and give myself advice, it would be just buy the nicer stuff now because I kind of was cheaping out, as I want to call it, my first couple years when I didn't have anything. So I'm just getting everything I can. It's like buckets, boom whackers, and then you're starting to get kind of like, I'll say it like this. No offense to First Act Equipment or Walmart, or I think that was who made, but I
Yeah,
just know
yeah,
they
yeah.
sold First Act. Okay. I'm not hating on it. Those are not instruments. They were like toys that,
Yeah.
you got and you're like, oh, this thing won't hold tune for more than 2 minutes and you pay for it.
I'll take it a step further and just we just had like because we started 4 weeks ago, so now we're in middle schoolers go get your instruments mode, uh, and the teacher has to say like do not buy this brand, this brand, this brand, or this brand. So then my
And we
private
mean it.
lessons are
We
coming up to
mean
me and
it.
they go, if I can't buy those 4 brands, what am I supposed to buy? And then the problem is they look those brands up and they find a $200 trumpet, and I go, what you really need is this one, and they go, oh, that's like double the price, and I'm like, yeah. And unfortunately they see those lower prices, they see those Amazon trumpets, and they go, I'm gonna get one of those. It's like, please don't get
Don't
the
do
Amazon
that
trumpet.
for your ears or mine or
Right.
anybody. But
100%.
I hate it. It's like, and I'll say this like recorders. There's definitely a difference in recorders. Like you go buy one from the Dollar Tree, it sounds just like a whistle the whole time, like an off tune whistle. Or like ukuleles. I remember the first time I wanted to learn one, I'm standing in the Barnes and Noble parking lot, not parking lot, geez, line. It felt like it was in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And I'm bored and I'm like, blah, 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 looking around. It was like, want to learn ukulele for $30? And I was like, yes,
Yes,
I
I do.
do.
Yes, I
And you have a
do.
book and a CD. What a deal. And then I get home and I'm trying to tune it. And within like 1 minute, even after weeks, it sounded like garbage. And I just didn't learn it until my sister got me a professional one that
Yeah.
was, $60. And you're like, wow, you get what you pay for.
Right. This is like the first one I ever got. This
Call up me
Kala brand.
too.
Yeah. And it's funny because you get nervous because I think this one, when it came out, when I first got these, were like $29.99. I swear.
Oh, wow.
And then when I went to get more, they were the next price level up, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh man, I must have got them right before a jump or something. But I
Yeah.
got 10, and then I was like, okay, I need 10 more, and the price was up. And then there was this other brand called Makala, and I was
Yeah, I
like,
have those.
yeah. And at the time I didn't know the difference in the two letters, so I bought more of those. And then it's like when you side by side them, it's like it's not that can they hold a tune, but it's just a sound quality difference. Where it's like I
Yes.
find myself when I want to go play my ukulele, it's like I gotta grab a kala because if I grab a makala, it just sounds different, and the
Yeah.
wood sounds like a different warmth level, and
And
it's
the
just kind of
action.
funny, right? Yeah, and it's like if I want to sound my best, I gotta grab the kala. At
Yeah.
now, send us a check, kala.
Thank you. We're not sponsored by you, but if you're listening, we're open advertising for
Yeah,
anybody, but
but
we'll give real reviews.
that was my COVID purchase. When everyone at the beginning of COVID had like 2 weeks of lockdown, and you're like, for the foreseeable future, we're going to be locked down. I think we all made purchases. And two things that I definitely bought. One was a P-bone, which is a plastic trombone. And I told myself I'm
Oh,
going to learn how to play trombone during quarantine.
how was that?
It's in pieces to my left in a bucket right now because I never got past enjoying doing long tones.
You just got to jump in and just do whatever you want to do,
Yeah, but I just kind
but
of
that
found
doesn't work.
also I didn't have any ability to make noise We have a baby in the house. Like when I have free time, baby's napping. Not a good time to play long tones. When I have free time, baby's asleep at night. Not a good time to do long tones. So it's like I never really found the time where I could just like try and get a perfect tone. And the other purchase was a Cordoba ukulele, which
Okay.
luckily I've used every day and used on my recordings and used in the classroom. And it has a pickup so I can plug it right into a sound system. And it's like this golden instrument where I'm like, this is the greatest ukulele I've ever put my hands on.
Yeah.
Granted, I've not put my hand on like a lot of ukuleles, but it's the greatest one I've touched. And
But
so,
you just
yeah,
know. Like I got one of the Les Paul concert ukuleles, and I'm like, this is a birthday gift to myself. And I'm
yeah.
like, I haven't played on a bunch. I don't know if I look like a lame-o, but it makes me happy.
So what's interesting, why I landed on that ukulele is because of how many ukuleles were sold out.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted like $100 ukulele. I thought I have a bunch of 30s. I have a 40. Let's get a $100 ukulele. And every ukulele from $1 to 100 was sold out at Guitar Center. And the next cheapest option was like a $200 ukulele. And I thought, okay, treat yourself,
Oh,
stimulus
did you?
money. That's what it was. That's what I ended up getting was that
Ooh,
$200 ukulele. And I love it. I love it
but it's
so
worth
much.
it. Yeah.
Yes, and it makes me happy. It's kind of like that subwoofer. When I hold it, when I play it, there's a thrill in my heart. Um,
Like
is
every
there
time it's like, this is nice.
exactly, and it's kind of like when you talk about buying nice. When I pick up the $30 soprano ukuleles, I'm like, the joy is shifted to I wish it was the other one. So, point of
Yeah.
that is there an instrument in your arsenal that makes you happy, or is there one that makes you unhappy when you have to interact with it?
Okay, so I'll say this. I feel like for a personal purchase, I got a Pearl Masters drum kit that we use, and it's like every time, like the color of it's nice because I used to not be big on colors of things either, but I don't know if I'm just becoming bougie because you know what you like and you like what you like. And
Yeah,
so when you're
yeah,
playing it, you're just like, wow, every time I'm grateful for it. And so I think that there's like that line of always feeling grateful when you make those purchases. As far as at school, um, I think that any new equipment that I've purchased, like name brand equipment, I've been happy with. And like as a percussionist, you definitely know there's like some brands. Like let's take we're xylophones for example. I'm not going to hate on any brands because we're not sponsored by anybody. So if
yeah.
y'all
Let's leave
want
those
us to
doors
give
open.
reviews, wide open. We're like Creed over here, arms wide open. Everybody. I'm just kidding. No, but I mean like you do get what you pay for, and I need to send a video of like some of these are from 1980, literally 1980. I mean,
Yeah.
just to show like how they do stay nice over a span of time. Like the nice sonar ones, the fiberglass ones still make a very good tone. The ones that are like the Paduk wood that are kind of like
Hmm.
cracked in the inside and they kind of buzz and they just sound like garbage every time you hit it. It's like at least they still have something to play on, but you can tell like if I have to go give an example on one of those, it just I don't know. It's like, oh,
Right.
I don't even want to play on that. So
No, I
yeah.
understand that. I understand that very much. I know I'm in a special situation because when the school opened, we got brand new equipment. A lot of it's still in great condition. Some of it's in pristine condition. What's funny is the instruments that have deteriorated the fastest are the boom whackers. And boom whackers are this instrument where it's just like, I have not figured out the perfect level of trust with the students.
I was about to say that too.
It's like I want to give them a responsibility of you can walk over and pick up your own boom whacker. If I see you play lightsabers, you put yours away. If I see you use it like a baseball bat, you put it away. And then I have all these rules. And then class will end, and I'll look at the boom whackers, and one of them will be bent into a 7. And I'm like, when did this happen?
Or the
How did I
bottom of
miss
it.
this?
And you're like, who did
Oh
this?
yeah, or it's like kids will just casually like sit on them, and I'm like, you're making an oval out of my boom whacker,
Why are you
and
doing that?
no kid in this school wants the oval boom whacker, so please stop. And I can't explain it honestly. I've replaced so many boom whackers, but because of it, I have a huge arsenal of boom whackers because you don't just buy one, you have to buy the set. So it's like
Yes.
for every time I lose like a lime green F, I need to buy a new octave. And so
I
I
hate
have
it.
lots of boom whackers and I'm just going to be retiring them fast. So my recent battle with boom whackers is to leave the broken ones in the bin And then before they all come out, I said, who's going to grab the one that's bent like a 7? And no one raised their hand. I go, okay, let's make sure we only have one boom whacker that looks like a 7 when this class is over. It's like I just have to remind them. Because I like to just show the good stuff, right? If you walk into my room, I want you to go, wow, look at all this good stuff. And it's kind of like with the boom whackers, I have to have a couple of examples visible.
Like 7 of them.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, this is what it looks like when you come in here and you baseball bat the ground as hard as you can. And they look like this. And so anyway, that's the one instrument where I'm like, I love boom whackers. I love playing them. The kids cannot get enough of them. But they just don't know their own strength, and or they don't understand what they're doing when they're doing it, to the point of destruction.
Well, okay, this is what I thought the other day. So this is a good conversation to have. One, do you think that those are just instruments that you have to have replaced periodically? Because like I don't foresee these like lasting us 40 years, especially like if you are playing them the way that you should. I mean, naturally, you're just like hitting plastic, so it's only a matter of time, like before it just starts to bend or break, and especially like the conditions people keep them in. So I wonder if that's one of those. Do you think
absolutely
that those are instruments that have to be replaced?
Because they're priced so reasonably, I think that's why I replace them without complaining. Like if someone broke a xylophone, my argument would be, I cannot replace this, so you will play the broken one. But with the boom whackers,
like I can. Get.
Yeah, exactly. You get what you get. But it's like with the boom whackers, I can replace it. Like the same boom whacker that's on Amazon is the same one that's at West Music, is the same one that's at whatever store can deliver it the fastest. But the trouble with the xylophone is like, if you break the xylophone that's in my room, I need $500 to replace it. And I need to give 2 weeks to the store to ship it to me. And who knows if they have it in stock. And, it's like a big commitment to replace one xylophone. The other side of that, so when I was pushing jumping jams, when I first started teaching, I did like a price comparison where it's like a brand new xylophone, let's say it's between $400 and $600. And a jumping jam, if you do it right, can be $200. Mm-hmm. And I go, okay, that's that. Now, before I swear it's a $400 difference, I also say you have to do basically $15 a year to get them tuned. And it's not going to necessarily be per year, but they go out of tune. So a part of the cost of jumping jams is tuning them. And you just kind of accept that one day this jumping jam will have cost as much as a xylophone because it did, let's say, 10 years of tuning. And it's like we're making up that money saved. I think boom whackers are very similar, though the cost is much lower, where it's like for $30 you have boom whackers. And if every year you just buy another replacement octave, and maybe every year is too often, but like let's say every 2 or 3 years you just buy a replacement octave, then it's kind of like it's still a great price to fun ratio.
Yeah. It's kind of like with recorders, like you get to maybe you have to like replace some of them in and out, but I mean like yeah. And I think like the boom whackers, I've noticed this year. Well, I should start with this. I had to retire the boom whackers the first day I got them out. It was with middle schoolers. I said, listen, do not hit anybody with these. Don't grab it and hit somebody on the arm. Don't poke them with it. Don't hold it over your head. Like all these things. And I said, especially don't hit anybody with it. Repeating it like 7 times. So I turned around and just like handed them all out. This kid just like was messing with his friend, whack, like right across his face. And it reminds me of that like scene in Tommy Boy where he gets hit with like the piece of wood right here across his face.
No.
You know what I mean? Like the
yes,
purple,
yes,
it's like not here, but right here. And it's just like this huge mark. And it's like, one, how hard did you hit him? 2, why did you do that? And so I kind of like retired them. But this past year I started getting them out just because it's easier to clean because they're plastic. So
right.
Thank you, Boom Whackers. I don't know if that's the company name. Boom Whackers.
I don't know either. I know they make a great product, whoever they are.
Yeah, thank you. Shout out to you for the tubes. But it seems like all of them really, really, really like those. And so I think it's like just this sensory kind of instrument too, where it's just like you're moving your arm. And it, like with drumsticks, like I always tell them, like, don't hit these drums like cavemen where they're back there. But like boom whackers, you can get a little more out. I don't know.
No, absolutely. It's that large muscle group where it's like you start to realize, like I just got done with 2 weeks of xylophones, and you start realizing which students have the ability to see a 1-inch wide target and go, ah, you know what I mean? Like when you start to get that glisten And when during a performance, you're like, some kid is just off on every note. And you look around, of course you have the kids that are doing this, and you're like, there's no way on earth that's what I taught you to play.
Yeah.
But you start to realize which kids need that giant xylophone because they need a 2-inch wide target.
Hmm.
And then you see which kids gravitate towards the glockenspiel, and they can hit a 1/2-inch target.
And they
tiny.
get so focused on it too.
Right.
It's
And
wild.
so I think boom whacker is the absolute opposite, where it's like I have one job, and the muscle is this, as
Like,
opposed to target practice. It's like I just have to hit the floor with something the size of a baseball bat. But yeah, I think that macro really relates to the students who are the opposed to those small muscle movements.
Yeah. And I think like just in general, if I had to give any advice to people about equipment that I really grown to appreciate, and some of this is like, let's just pretend right now we're in a COVID-free world slash still, in one, obviously, but things that I have a bigger appreciation for are like scarves, like even for the little ones, like especially preschool, because I used to just be like, they're not going to want to grab these like fabrics and just move these colors around the room. But then you start to see how sensory oriented that age group is, and they're just like over there doing their thing, and it looks cool in the room. And then just having more than just, because I think when I first started, I was very big on like what I was familiar with, which is xylophones, hand drums. And so when you branch out into the other things like boom whackers, jumbie jams, scarves, hacky sacks, you know what I mean? Like it makes it a little more fun for you to have that range. And those are cheaper things.
Absolutely. We sent home scarves with every student when we went distance ed, and that was about 800 scarves. And then we asked for them back, and I was like, and it was like a very soft, nice of like, if you don't think you're gonna use it, if you think it's the end of the trash can, bring it back. And sure enough, I got 400 scarves back, which is cool. So the fun part was like when we originally did scarves, it was everyone take one. And then you get a couple more scarves to go, cool, everyone can take two. And you can do crossing the plane where you throw this way, throw that way, switch hands, blah, blah, blah. Put your brighter color on the drum first, put the darker color on the drum second, drum on your scarves. Things like all these fun things of two. And now that there's 400 in the closet, I'm like, even if I have a class of 50, I'm like, we're gonna have a lot of scarves this time around.
Yeah, but it's some reason like they're just drawn to it, especially the way that you present it. It's like
Right.
if you present something fun and cool, they're like, I want that. Like, for example, it's funny with like the age group, like kindergarten, preschool. I have this like bin of maracas, and one of them was this like ugly, brown, nasty, kind of cracked looking maraca, but it was the only one in the container that was brown. The rest of them, are fun colors. They all fought over that one. I've never got to have this brown one. And then you like,
oh my gosh,
take that one out and you're like, this one actually sounds the worst. And you just have to learn like, I don't know. They just want what they
one
can
of
have.
anything. If you have one of something, there's trouble.
They'll let you know about it too.
Yeah, right. And that's what I argue for the keyboard in the room or the piano. I'm like, there's one piano and there's a lot of us. If we take turns, it'll ruin the whole class. And if they fight for it, I will literally let them go and be like, okay, we all get 30-second turns, and I'll see you in 30 minutes when we're all done doing this. But yeah, that's like with a drum set, there's one drum set. The piano, there's one piano. So you get that one unique item, and it's like game over. I had somebody during COVID donated congas to my classroom, real congas, which is super cool. And because there's two of them, there's two large brown congas, and the rest of the room is buckets and hand drums and things like that are kind of more child orientated. All of the kids want the congas, even though they're older, they're dirtier, they don't sound as good, they're quieter, in fact. And they're just like, it's just kind of this status of like, I'm playing the ones that you guys don't have. And it's like, it's enough to drive me to put them in the closet at this point, because people want to fight over them. And it's like,
every time though, right?
Right. Because everything else is like a bucket
guilty.
drum. There's no guilt with like, my bucket's green, your bucket's red, whatever. We all have buckets.
My
but
kids,
congas.
I do feel bad about that. So somebody donated me some congas, like nice congas. We were like, are you sure you want to donate these to me? Like, these are very nice. But anyways, I started to just like get them out with, I guess like 3rd through 5th. I've not usually done that, usually for middle school. And, like I've got enough like congas over here. I used some of the tabanos, and then I didn't have enough. So I gave like buckets to some other students, I'm like, we can't switch like we always do. So this is what you're getting this class period. And they're like, so you're going to give us these? They said, how much did you say that one was? $400. How much is this bucket? I'm like, you know how much that bucket is. Be happy to play on it. But then they have to guilt you into, you know what? I've been at this school for 5 years and you've never let me play that bass xylophone or whatever else. But it's just funny how they call you out on it.
Yeah, no, as soon as you said that, I'm like, I can think of 3 items in my room where it's like the bass xylophone bars, like the
Oh yeah,
solo
the
bars
Mac Daddies of them all. Yeah,
with the giant mallet, and it's like there's tears over that every time they come out. I have 4 pearl marching bass drums that are meant for little kids, and
I don't have little kids, but that's cool.
yeah. But the harnesses are made for like a 5th grade body, and the kids go, when do we get to do that? And I'm like, when it's nice outside. And then next week they go, when do we get to do that? And I go, is it still 105? Is it 105 outside? You want to go outside with a bass drum on your chest when it's 105? You have the rest of your life to do that.
I don't want to go out there and watch you do that.
Right. But it's like that guilt of like the 5th graders are like, we haven't got to play this since 3rd grade. And I'm like, I promise, as soon as it's 80 degrees outside, we will go outside with marching bass drums strapped to our chest. But until then, but yeah, there's always that excitement of that one instrument. Do you find that because of your instruments, have they been the same instruments for a long time? When was the last time a new instrument was introduced into your room? Was it those congas? Or like, what's the last thing that came into your room where the students were like, a new thing?
My cajon. And by the way, you were talking about subwoofers. Have you seen the Meinl subwoofer cajon?
No, I have not.
Dude, it just like, it's one of those things where like, that's something I play on. I'm like, thank you, self, for like pushing to get this because it just like sounds so superior. I'm just kidding. I'm biased to it. Anyways, it like looks like a subwoofer. The front of it has like at the bottom, the 2 big squares out of it. And so it kind of just pushes the sound in a different way. And especially if like you loosen up the screws a little bit, it just has a really nice like bass and slap tone to it. So anyways, of course, like all of them are like, what? Do I ever get to touch this? And it's like, well, COVID's still a thing, but it's the same thing like with the piano, you know?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I have wipes. I have a mountain of wipes. The edge of my desk, I made a wipe wall, like a moat or something like that, like a wall around a castle. And it's just all of the wipes I have. So it's like if someone needs something, I'm like, open this one, here's a wipe, close it. And it's like 8 of them are open. I'm like, here's a wipe, here's a wipe, here's a wipe. But yeah, if someone touches the piano, I'm like, and we got to wipe the whole thing down.
Yeah.
Get us back to where we were. But yeah, look at these Meinl ones. Those look fun.
Dude, you got to play on one. If you live closer to me, I would like drive over right now and be like, just play this. I need an instant review.
Cajones are interesting because when I was a new teacher in the district, another teacher got the funding to buy, I think it was Meinl's kits, but Meinl made like a build your own cajon kit. And I want to say it was Meinl. I don't want to lie.
Which on a side note, I really like over the years, I feel like Meinl's really stepped up their like auxiliary percussion game. Cause I think I always just associated Meinl with like their cymbals, you know, like German, where it's like you can hit them as hard as you want, kind of heavier music. And lately I've really liked all of their, you know, like I said, just auxiliary percussion.
Yeah, I think they went a little bit more education facing a couple years back because they started pushing their stackable hand drums at PASIC. And that was my awakening, which they could have existed for 5 years before then. But that's the beauty of these conventions, back when we used to go to conventions. But I walked past it, and they had these stackable hand drums where they were fixed tuning. But basically, the bass one would go like the Russian stacking dolls, nesting dolls, where like the smallest drum fit underneath the medium, fit underneath the bass, and all went into a backpack. So as a hand drummer, circle drummer teacher, you could show with a backpack and have 3 hand drums in your backpack.
Oh,
and it was a really cool idea that I bought. I bought 2 sets of them for my classroom. And they're still some of the kids' favorites because they range in size. So the students that are shorter want the drum that's their size. You know, everything else is kind of one size fits all, but their heights are different. So then the kid who wants to sit while they play can get the short one, and the kid who likes to stand can take the other one. And it's just cool to have that diversity, as opposed to a lot of times we argue we want it all to be uniform so there's no arguing. And it's like, that's
Right.
one of those situations where it's like, I have two little ones, two mediums, two
Right.
larges, whatever.
So everything's good.
Yeah, exactly. There's no arguing. Then we can always talk about sharing. But Mino made a build your own cajon kit, and it's available for $54 on Sweetwater. But this teacher, and all of her genius, was like, instead of getting chairs for my room, and instead of worrying about alternative seating, what if I could build a class set of cajons? And she went
Sick.
full crazy, like built them. She painted them the school colors. I think she got the school logo on a sticker.
That's cool.
And then she had a parent-made fabric inserts for the top so that you could sit on them comfortably. And as soon as you said cajon in the classroom, I was like, where have I heard that before? But anyway, this parent teamed up with, the teacher teamed up with the parents and like the head custodian, and they built all of them in a weekend. It was like 30 of them.
Dude, do they sound pretty decent?
Yes. And like that was the whole point. It's like the kids could do exactly what she was doing on her instrument. And decent was probably the word, because, as it was your subwoofer cajon, I'm sure it sounds amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So by comparison, I'm sure it's a tough comparison. But going from 0 to this cajon, I'm sure was a great leap already.
Well, I've thought about that, like how neat it would be to teach all of them that. And I even thought like this past week, middle school's doing this like busking project where they're coming up with their own like little street routine. And
cool.
They're using like boxes, different size boxes. You can paint the box and just play like a little part over it, which is neat. And I thought about that. I was like, man, how neat would that be to have a whole classroom of cajons just to like
Right.
teach them a new instrument? And I almost wonder if that would be like a really good crossover even in the drum kit for some of them, which I know I'm thinking in like percussion terms, but just the fact of like sitting and playing on something that's simultaneously teaching you new.
100%. I mean, could you imagine the tinker value of like, all right, I need you to sit down, but also you can tap on your seat while we're transitioning into this or transitioning into that. Like, I think that part's cool.
I wanted to ask you that. Do you ever let them just tinker in between your transitions? Like there's days that I started this more so like the middle of last year where it's like, if I can't get the computer to work, they sit on those like little floor mats that are like the squishy kind of like mat material.
Yeah.
And I'll just let them, all right, as long as you're playing on your floor mat. And the other day I wrote up on the board, this is like second grade. And I was like, this is a paradiddle. Go slow. Whoever can do this gets a rock at the end of class. And then they're just over there tinkering.
Gets a rock?
Yes. I give them
cool
rocks.
Or you just like handing out rocks? Like you go to the field and you just like, oh, here are my treats for today.
You're like, oh my gosh, these still have mud on them. No, Dollar Tree has saved my life. Like one of actually a guest that we're going to be having on, he has the idea to give his students rocks. Like Dollar Tree, like sometimes you can get the like sea glass. I don't know why it makes them go wild every class. Are you handing out rocks today? And I'm like, yeah, but if you're asking for one, you're not going to get one. And they're like, no, we were just wondering if anybody was going to get one of those.
Not me. No.
I would never ask
I would
that
never.
for you.
You and me, we're tight. Don't worry.
Yeah, like we're best friends still, right? We're cool. Was I talking? Did you give me a red bubble?
Amazing.
I don't do that.
Yeah, I as far as rewards go, okay, so your original question was, do I let them tinker? And
Oh, yes, sorry.
what I'm running into right now is that kindergarten desperately wants to touch instruments. So I feel I'm at a disadvantage, and maybe if any teacher has a solution to this, I'm all ears. But the instruments are visible because I can't hide them in 5-minute passing periods. So I need the instruments close enough to a playing position for 5th grade so they can walk in and play. And I need them almost untouchable and preferably invisible for kindergarten.
I'm in the same boat with that.
Okay, great.
Because they walk in my room and I feel so guilty having it all out. And they're like, are we going to get to do that?
I have grown to hate that question over the last 4 weeks because on day 1, the students walked in and I'm proud of my room, as we all should be. And I have ukuleles hanging. I have guitars in cases. I have the xylophones visible, the steel drums visible, the marching drums visible. And they all walk in, they go, which one do we get to play today? And I'm going,
like,
none of it. None. I'm going to talk the whole time about safety. I'm going to talk about fire drills and active shooter drills. And I'm going to talk about how do you go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And then they come back for week 2 and they go, are we even going to get to play today?
I hate that question. I hate it when I'm in the middle of like, because I'll do like a little intro and I try not to talk too much to the little ones. And like, we'll do a composer, just like whatever I'm doing for that month. And then they'll just raise their hand. Are we going to play the instruments today?
Oh, yeah. In the middle of your stride. You're like,
Yes.
I'm really hitting them with this funny story about what we're going to do. And there's like, are we going to play xylophone? Are you going to shut
Or
up and
what?
let me play xylophones by any chance? Like that's what I hear in my head when they ask that question.
Where when they're like, do you know what time it is? Yes, I know what time it is.
I mean, and this is a question I don't blame anybody for asking.
I know.
But when they go like, how long until our classroom teacher comes back? I'm just like, ouch, ouch.
You're like,
My
do you know
favorite-
what that sounds like?
Yeah, the one I forgive is the one that's like, how long until lunch? And I'm like, I support this question.
I feel it too.
I understand you're hungry, but I was like, it's a good hour and 15 before you're going to eat food. And they're just like, what does that even mean? I'm like, I right. You don't know what an hour and 15 minutes means. Okay, so back to do you let them play? So kindergarten, I switched. I had pads like you talked about, where it's kind of like those feet relievers, where it's like a square of soft foam.
Yeah.
And that's what I
where
used
you
to
can,
do.
like,
And I
plug
make
'em in.
rows, and they were color coded, and it was sweet. And then when I found out my largest class was going to be 64 students, I was like, I need a different solution. So I went online and got Velcro circles that stick to carpet very well. And I made a grid of 8x8, and it's a rainbow, which is gorgeous. With a little bit of knowledge from my PE teaching friend next door, he's like, you can't use your red line as part of your rainbow. And I said, why is that? And he goes, you need your red line as a punishment row. And I was like, oh, interesting. And he's like, so if you have a student that's on a green dot and they're talking to a blue dot, you go, oh, green dot, go to a red dot. Oh, red dot, red dot. Oh, no, a red dot. But the whole point of this being that like red dot needs to be secluded, because you're going to have the students that either A, need space, the student that can't, sit with their legs crossed, whether it's in a cast, or of a student that has wheelchair access, or a student that needs to stand for whatever needs, red dots are reserved for that space. So anyway, that's just a total side note, but it's something I would have never thought of. And I've used it almost daily, where it's not just a punishment for those who need to be alone, but it's like, oh, here, no, you go to a red dot because you get more space. Then it's sold as a positive. Red
Right.
dots don't have to squeeze their legs in because it's further away from other people. Point of that whole statement is that I could say blue dots walk to an instrument. If you play, you're going to sit back down. Then the blue dots walk to their instruments, and the first kid to go up there goes, whack. Oh, ooh, blue dots, so loud. Blue dots, sit back down. Blue dots, thank you. You tried. Green dots, can we stand up and walk to an instrument? Green dots. And green dots, oh, we can't do what blue dots just did. So green dots walk up to their instruments, and they barely tap. You can't even hear them tapping. And I'm like, okay. If they continue that volume, yellow dots, can you join them? And yellow dots. And the whole point is we get to the point where all dots are up, everybody's an instrument. And I let it go as long as they can handle it. And as soon as it's either so loud that I see the first kid do this, then that's when I'm like, we're done. Or if I tap out, sure. But if they can go like 10 minutes of playing within their means, no instruments being hurt, they're not playing too loud, there isn't a child plugging their ears, I'm like, 10 minutes is what they need. I have this kind of underlying belief of if they're capable of it, then they wanted to, and maybe they needed to. Like that student that can't sit down and he just wants to dance, part of me says he needs to dance because that's what will get him to not dance later. And there's this kind of also understanding of they go to specials to get out of the classroom. So I can't have a really hardcore classroom perspective. I need to remind myself they just sat in a desk for 3 hours and this is their 1 hour break from that desk besides lunch and recess. So I need to have this compassion of like the kid that has to move, we have to move. So if they can manage playing instruments on their own, going crazy, playing whatever they want, if they can do it without the first kid plugging their ears, I'm all for it.
I think that that's something that I've taken to high consideration, like what they've had to do in their classroom. Like for ours, they're having to eat in their classrooms. And that's, you can't go outside for recess. They're in their classroom for
Right.
that. Again, like sitting there all day. So I've tried to really make my classes a little more active, as in, and I'm not in my classroom either. So it's just like one of those things where you start to realize like it's kind of been nice spacing them out, which I can't believe. Did you say 65, by the way?
Yeah,
Is how many you have?
64.
Oh my gosh.
It's just growing pains because our district, and maybe you've experienced it also. Let's say you had 200 kids, or let's say 100 kids join your school this year. How soon would they hire the teachers they need for those 100 is the question. And
If you
private
can
might
find
just put,
them.
well, sure. So private might say, we put out a help wanted ad and we'll start doing interviews as soon as someone applies. The public schools have to wait for count day where they do an attendance, a statewide attendance, and they report to the government, we have blankety blank students, we need blankety blank dollars per student, and then the district receives the amount of money per student we have, and then each school receives money per student that they have. And so then you can hire teachers to replace to fill the needs. But this takes like a month and a half from when school starts.
Oh my gosh.
So we have classes with 32, 33 students in them right now, and they don't get relief until mid-September. And that's just the way public schools working in our district. And it might be sooner for other districts, but basically once you do count day, that's how everyone gets their money, which is,
So,
yeah.
like, are you supposed to have that? Have you had that many students in a classroom before?
No,
So this is your
because
first year?
yeah, this is the first year of it. Because and then there's other ways to battle this. And the reason I say no with a question mark on the end of it, my first school, when I started, they didn't work on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday schedule, a 5-day-a-week schedule. They worked on a 6-day, 7-day, 8-day rotation where you letter the days. A, B, C, D, E, F is a 6-day rotation. So Monday's A, great. The next Tuesday is an A. The next Wednesday is an A. And the idea being that students were then spread out, kind of like mimicking a 12-month school where they only go to some things, they go to it less, but less often for a longer time. And so the idea being that I'd see a student on Monday, I'd see them next week on Tuesday. And that allowed me to not have as many doubles, and doubles just when you get two classes at the same time because you have to, because of the constraints of the schedule. So
Right.
right now, our school has 150 more students than it did last year. And that's between students that went, let's say, homeschool, or they went to some sort of non-public school model when things went crazy. These are students that moved into the neighborhood. Henderson is the fastest growing city in Nevada right now. And they're literally building houses visible from the school. So it's like once they finish that house, a family will move in, and that kid goes to our school now.
Wow.
And I think like the third one was kind of like we had students that left our school for charter schools, and however that shook out, sometimes those students come back, is what I'll say. And so,
Well, I mean, that's still though, like to have that many students in one room. Because I mean, like this year, I felt like having them spaced out has been really nice because then it's like before we start, you can just like stretch out, let them get all their like literal wiggles out where they're just
right.
moving around. But like, I wouldn't have the capacity for that many students to be able to like freely move around.
Yeah, there's no freely moving around. So like when we move, it's stand on your dot, put 2 feet on your dot. Now wiggle your arms. Don't touch your neighbor. Don't touch your neighbor. I said don't touch your neighbor. Okay. And and it's kind of like
touching.
that. Yeah, exactly. Touching means touching, and no means no, and all of that. But yeah, so it's going to be fixed, but once count day happens. So once count day happens, we get the money for more teachers. There gets more teachers. We go to a 6-day rotation. It spreads the students out more, and then there'll be lots of happiness all around. But until that happens, this is the situation where it's an 8x8 grid on the floor of here's your dot. Don't leave your
Right.
dot, please.
And please don't touch. Yes, that's still touching. Oh,
Right,
you're
right.
still
And I can
touching
see your
them.
nose, and your mask is not on. Your mask is not on. I can see your nose. I can see your nose. We have the problem of too many choices in our
Yes.
neighborhood. We have 2 charter schools. We have 2 public schools. We have a K-12 charter. So I guess it'd be 3 charters then. And then we have like a private Catholic school.
Hmm.
And all of those are within reasonable driving distance of the neighborhood I teach in. So because of this great opportunity of choice, people change their minds, or they try something and they end up, or they go and it's not a fit, or it is a fit. And because of that. And that's why count day is interesting, because imagine if a student is at a charter school on count day, that charter school gets the thousands of dollars that student's education is worth. And then if they were to leave that charter school and go to a public school, we have to teach that student without their money. Their money is still at the charter school. And
Oh, I didn't know it
it's a
worked like
very
that.
broken system.
See, we don't have charter schools in this area. Like we've got, the private Catholic schools and then public schools. But yeah, that's very interesting because I would never have thought about that perspective of funding and how it doesn't. I mean, does it ever come back with the student to your school?
Oh, no, never. Not a cent. And so, for instance, like if a student paid tuition at your school and then they leave in February, their tuition money, of course, stays with you. And I say you, not you, of course. But then they go to a public school, and the public school then takes that student on without any funding because the funding was delegated in the fall.
And see, like with us, I feel like it's, people are paying monthly to go. So it's like, you're not signed into some like contract where it's like, we're going to take all of this, which from what I understand, sometimes charter schools, they work a little bit differently in that regard. But I don't know. I'm just like sitting here thinking about how crazy that is to have the way that it's working right now, like the stress that must put on different places.
It becomes a popularity contest is the bottom line of it. So what's interesting, the music teacher perspective is that you figure out what's going on at all these schools music-wise, because you get a student that comes into your room and they walk into your room and they go, "Where are the recorders?" And I go, "Oh, because of COVID, we're definitely not doing recorders anytime soon." And then they'll say, "At my last school, all we did is recorders." And I'll go, "And where did you come from?" "Okay, noted. Very cool." And then the next student will show up and they'll go, "Wow, xylophones. We never got to touch the xylophones at my last school. And where did you come from?" "Oh, very cool. Very cool. Good to know." And it's like you start keeping tabs on like what happens at other schools that are nearby and what are they learning in their classroom? What instruments do they play? Are they hardcore vocal? Are they hardcore instruments? Do they only have xylophones? Do they absolutely only do recorders? That kind of thing. And then I imagine simultaneously students leave my school and they go to a school with, let's say, any more rules or any more strictness in the classroom, and they go, "My last school, the teacher just let us do crazy things." And it's like, I'm sure there's a negative somewhere where it's just like, at my last school, the teacher, he didn't have as many rules as you guys, which is not a great thing. It's not a brag in the least bit. But it's like, in order for me to keep things entertaining on my end, even, I try not to be this rule person of like, you must sit down and you must do this and you must do that. But yeah, I'm sure there's other teachers doing the exact same thing where they're like, "Oh yeah, you came from that school? Uh-huh. Where you just get to like play music with the party lights on? Uh-huh. Real educational."
Yeah. And I think like for me, it's so funny because I'll get a call from people when they'll go to, a new school and it makes me sad. Like I don't like hearing that they came from somewhere where they didn't get to play instruments or that their new school doesn't allow them to do those sorts of things. And so I think that for me, it's like so funny whenever they do go to another place and they're like, "Where are the instruments?" Or they're so used to my personality specifically that it worries me sometimes when they go to somebody that then takes like this passion that they had and they just squash it because they're like, "No, my way or the highway." And it's like you start, I guess, realize the schools around you where they're not as in tune with their student culture, which is something, we'll totally brush up on like a whole episode because that's such an important part of it too. Have you ever wondered, like, even some of my elementary curriculum, you're looking at that and you're like, are they going to remember this nearly as much as playing songs and learning these terms and doing these things more, even middle school? Like that's just a complete side note, but just to say, like, what does that do overall to pick one way, one path?
For sure. I mean, I think like the idea of counting 16th notes, I think there's an argument for we don't want to do 1 ienda, 2 ienda at a young age. So I fell on the ticky, 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 ticky method. And then I've heard other ones, which I can't even recall at the moment, but it was like taka Takadimi.
Takadimi, yeah.
Takadimi was like Indian hand drumming. But what was the one you just said? Takatimi?
No, I think
Okay.
Takadimi.
Takadimi. Okay.
Now I'm getting all mixed up on
I
them
know.
too.
Right.
Because I try not to, especially when it gets to counting triplets. Like
Luckily, I
the
don't.
people one to Lika talk. Do you know what I'm talking about? One to Lika talk. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're saying, but I don't. Luckily, I don't approach it in the classroom. Like triplets,
Yeah,
I'm like, that's a middle school thing. Good luck. Godspeed.
Well, just the way, yeah. There's like a huge divide where you're like, wait a minute. I don't know what this is. Don't even tell it to my brain. I don't want to mix it up with anything.
Right. Yeah, I made the mistake of making a melody to a song have upbeats where it was like rest and da 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 da. And explaining to a 4th grade class, there's a rest, but we're playing immediately after. There's a rest, and then we're playing immediately after. And it was like the confusion that I caused. And I was like, what was I thinking when I created my own problem here? But like, those are things I don't want to ever. Like, I learned my lesson. No more rest T, tiki T. Like,
I've started using just words, honestly. Like the other day, I said, listen, we're still saying apple right here. You just don't play on apple. And they did it. And I was like, why didn't I do this 7 years ago?
Yeah, I'm going to do that on Monday. I'm definitely taking that and running with it.
Okay, please tell me how it goes. Because it was just one of those moments where I was like, wow, that's all I had to do.
Right. Well, that's what kills you when you come up with a solution and you're like, that was it. That was the key. I said 158 words and it was apple that solved my problems. Like,
yeah, or strawberry for the triplets. I did that even with high schoolers. I'd be like, I know this sounds elementary. Just do it. Just say it and then they'll fix it. And it'll be, they're playing like some crazy multi-piece. And then it's like, listen, I know this sounds elementary. Just put this word with it and they'll get it immediately. I think it's just a different pathway of the same thing.
Absolutely. So would you say there's an instrument that sums up your program? If a student came back to you as a senior in high school and they're like, Miss Smith, you wouldn't believe it. I don't know. Are you going by Miss Smith right now? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. I go by Miss S.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay.
But yeah.
Sorry.
I'm trying to think though. You like ask me these questions where it's like.
So a student comes back after 12th grade and they come back to your program and they're like, you won't believe it, Miss S. I can't believe you still have blank. Like, what do you think the instrument is that they remember when they come back to you?
See, I think that a lot of them associate me with steel drums now because it's something that's so different than anything that they see. And even now, like I had some students move to Hawaii and their mom was like, hey, how do we purchase this? Or like, what you do with them. So I honestly feel like that will probably be something that a lot of them have the most fun with. Or bucket drumming, like one of those things, just the unconventional way of like getting to play along with the backing tracks, I think is the biggest thing they like. Playing to a beat.
Yeah.
I know you said instrument, but it's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question because when they come back, they're not going to say, I can't believe you still have xylophones. They're going to say, I remember that time we played a beat on the steel drum and we sang about strawberries. Like, you know what I mean? I know 100% that a student, because I get this year to year from like students in August, because I do a hardcore no Halloween songs until October. Now, granted, I'm on the opposite side because some people would be like, no Halloween songs till the week of Halloween. Some people say no Halloween songs because we have Jehovah's Witnesses. But I'm like, I made sure I wrote all of our Halloween songs, and like only one of them makes the mistake of saying the word Halloween. So the other ones I learned after that one, don't say the word Halloween. It's just a dark night. That's it. It's a night. That's it.
How could you not bring up Pet Chihuahua?
Right. It's exactly it. And I
by the way, listeners, that's his bop. Like one of my parents came up to me last week. I didn't get to teach preschool last year because of COVID. And they were like, hey, that Pet Chihuahua song, my kid came home. We didn't know what he was talking about. We had to Google it. It's a bop in our household. So I just want to give you a shout out to that. So everybody knows, like Pet Chihuahua, listen to it now. It'll change your life.
That makes me very happy to hear. And the whole point is that I have students in August going, when are we doing my Pet Chihuahua? And I have to do the jerk thing. And I'm like, when should we do my Pet Chihuahua? And they're like, at Halloween. And I'm like,
really? Yes,
deal.
You got it.
Deal. At Halloween it is. But the point of that is that that's what students are going to remember, because not only do we do Pet Chihuahua, but I commit to this whole thing where the lights are off in the classroom. We get as close to jet black as we can. We turn on black lights, and then I build a cardboard box wall that splits the room into two pieces. And the students, kind of like Jenga, pull out boxes. They can have crawl spaces through the wall. And we play the melody. Bum 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 ba-dum bum ba-dum 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 bum ba-dum 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 bum ba-dum. And then whenever in every verse the word hide happens. I hear a sound, so I hide. And when they hear the word hide, they have to all go through this crawl spaces of the box. And if the boxes fall over, the lights come on, the music stops, and we all have to rebuild the wall. But if we get through the whole song, it's like a celebration of like the wall stayed up, and we get to dance and have fun. And anyway, that's the thing students remember. And I agree that like they're not going to say, remember when we played my Pet Chihuahua on xylophones. They're going to say, remember when we climbed through the wall and it was awesome and we knocked over the boxes and it was so funny.
Right.
And it's one of those non-musical things that I'm sure that's going to be what's on my face for the rest of my career is like, that's Swick and we do my Pet Chihuahua with the boxes with him.
No, that's good. It's nostalgic though, right? Like everybody
sure.
remembers their like fifth. Well, I would think they remember fifth grade, but specifically even like music in that way. And it's like we've talked about that. They're going to remember how you made them feel, but more specifically, you know, like taking away what unique things you do in your classroom. Like that, if my teacher did that with me, I'd be like, this is the most dope thing I've ever done in my life. The lights, right. Everything.
Right. And it's gotten crazier every time because every time it's like, okay, we have a bigger budget or I have to outdo last year. And it's like, now this is expectation of every year. I need a new Halloween song. I need a new scary night song every year now. So yeah, because of that, I have to start like now in September and start coming up with ideas because October 1st is like, it's the start of scary month.
Yeah. Well,
So
no,
it's
that's
like,
cool though.
it is. It's fun.
You have
but
that with them.
That's what students will remember. So it's like they're not going to remember, I'll say, they're not going to remember recorders or scarves or the Ta Titi Talk lessons as much as like that. And so I'm glad to know that like you're like we're playing with a beat, which is fun. I mean, and that's kind of what I get nervous about, and maybe feel this way of like when students leave your program, did you set false expectations of what the next level of music is? Because they go from October walls and climbing and having fun to like their next classes. All the lights are on. We're all in
It's
chairs.
a bummer,
Nobody
man.
talk.
It's a bummer. Yeah.
And here's your saxophone. Here's the book. Go home and figure out what a B flat is. And
there's so many things that could be like crossed over so well. I've thought about this a lot. Like if you could get with the band directors, you're like, what do you realistically need them and want them to know that they don't know? So that way, when they do get into that class, they're already taking this knowledge they have and taking it to the next level. So it's like eighth notes and quarter notes would have been the worst thing just to review it as, hey, when you're in elementary school, you would say TT Ta for this. Now we're going to convert this over because I think like telling them what it's converting to makes it so much better versus presenting something they've done as brand new, you know. And it's just it's a bummer whenever I do the things I do with my students, even the middle schoolers, and they go on to another program and then they don't like it as much anymore because it's the way it's being presented to them.
Right. And you and I both agree that that's how we feel about it, where it's like we feel like they're going to go somewhere and like it less. And what's in the back of my mind is they like it less, sure, but were they equally prepared? Like for the sterile elementary classroom where it wasn't as fun, there wasn't brick walls and there wasn't jumpy jams and there wasn't fun, crazy beats. Did they learn more? I think is the question that haunts me of like, yes, we had more fun and the students remember it. And this little piece that gets in my head of like, did they learn the same amount as the class that uses the workbook? And it's like, am I the teacher that just has fun and doesn't teach them anything? Or like, are they going to remember, 1, 2, 3, and 4? Or are they going to remember, oh yeah, my last teacher, we just played songs with the lights off. And that's kind of my biggest fear as they go to 6th grade. Because in Nevada, 6th grade is a hard change. It's no more general music. It's you're either in band, orchestra, choir, and that maybe mariachi even, but like guitar class. There's like the major options. And it's back into like a sterile, I'm going to say sterile environment, but 50 kids in a room.
More traditional.
Yeah, traditional environment. And it's like, that's the concern of like, I don't want them to reflect on their music time and say, it was really fun and I learned nothing. Now, granted, there is education. I'm not pretending like there's no education. But it's like, if they remember the story of my pet chihuahua more than they remember how do you count eighth notes, then it's going to make it look like we never talked about eighth notes.
See, that's the thing is like I try to integrate that within those lessons. It's like I started really thinking about projects, like maybe this month with fourth grade, we're going to look at 16th notes. All right, 16th connected to eighth notes. And so I think when I do that and then I put it into a form of a lesson like that, or like even just a backing track, it's like simultaneously teaching them that. And it's been interesting for me because when they do go into middle school, excuse me,
You're fine.
like, well, I've been in a unique environment where some of my college students, I'm still teaching them every once in a while. I'll give them a lesson of certain sorts, but I've been teaching them since some of them were in fifth and sixth grade. So it's like, for me, I get to watch them go through all these stages. And so knowing what I felt like they were lacking, it's like I can fix it the next year for the next group that starts, if that makes
Absolutely.
sense.
No, there's a real comfort to that idea because you get to see what did they need to know last year, and you can simultaneously adjust your plan where it's like, I don't have a direct connection, and I have a great connection, a relationship, I would say, with the sixth grade teachers that I feed, but we still have not had an honest conversation of like, when you get them, are they just as well off as the other students? Are they happier? Are they sadder? Are they scared? Are they the ones that quit because it's hard? I want that data almost of like,
Yeah.
did I prepare them for general and for traditional music class?
Yeah. So people that are listening, I want to know, do you collaborate with your I guess what would you say, like the next stage or next school they go to? Yeah, the feeders. Because it's weird for me because I'm at a private school.
Right. And you kind of feed yourself.
Right.
Your sixth graders hang out with you all till eighth grade, right?
Right. And then some of those, before when I was teaching at the high school, I mean, of course, they get to pick between 3 of the high schools here in our area. But of course, like some of them go to different areas because they're from different areas. But yeah, I want to know if other people collab with like that.
Are you
and get to hear the real
with
stuff.
Those high school teachers?
I feel like because I am so involved on a percussion level, like judging all district or being a part of, like I'm the 4th district elementary music chair. Cause I think it's like different where you're from. It's like we have meetings, and I'm in charge of the professional development, all that fun stuff. But yeah, so like I try to stay connected with people for that reason, but definitely like the high school directors, like just from being around the band world.
Right. Yeah, because you have your toe in everything, and that's kind of what's different about you, where it's like I barely know 3 high school band directors in this city, and I think there's 80, and I think I know 3 of them by name. And it's
that's like overstimulating. That would stress me out. I'd be like, I can't do talk
right.
all
And it's
things.
like there's a high school every 8 miles, 10 miles, and it's like I know a couple of them. And so it's like I don't even know. So it's like with middle school, it's like at least I know my students end up here. But after that, I don't even know. I don't even know who their high school director ends up being. So it's just kind of funny how it works out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'd say we did a great job of covering the material that we set out to cover. As always, there's always a question we don't get to or something like that. But I had a great time discussing all of this with you. I hope that your week what week are you starting this Monday or Tuesday, I should say?
Oh gosh, I guess this would be week 5.
Wow. Okay, cool. So we started at the same time.
Yeah, week 5.
That's awesome. Yeah, week 5. It's insane to think we're at week 5 already. We made a podcast last week and the week before, and I think we kind of turned those into just releasing energy about our early weeks in the school year. And I think it's for the better we said everything we said. But I just hope everyone has somebody they can talk to about their first weeks of school back.
Yeah. Talk to the people.
Right? If I can make a general statement, we're usually chiseling away at what isn't a first grader or what isn't a 5th grader, Like, have you ever heard like the metaphor of a sculpture? Like an artist looks at a rock and they chip away everything that isn't the sculpture. So whatever's left, that's the sculpture. And I feel like that as educators, that's what we do. Like when they show up, we go, we're going to chip away at all the behaviors that don't belong on a first grader. And then every year you chip away at those things. And this first month of school has been like sledgehammering rock, just being like, I don't want any of these behaviors.
Like,
I don't want any of these thought processes. I don't want any of these actions you're bringing into our school.
Yeah, but I think it's like having to, like you said, when you texted me about your first week, you're like, you just have to remember they haven't been around an actual teacher, some of them in 2 years. And so, yeah, it's been interesting getting to the point that I'm at, but I think I'm definitely in a way better headspace. Like I'm starting to see the potential in where my year is going to go, if that makes sense.
Well, I wish you all the best for week 5. It's a lot of the same over here as well. So I'm hoping it just kind of gets better every day.
Yes.
But
one day at a time.
Right. One day at a time, 1 week at a time. I think this week's a 4-day week for us because the holiday. And then next week is a 4-day week for professional development. I don't know what genius decided 2 4-day weeks in a row where we miss Monday is a good idea.
They're the worst.
It's the students who
the
go
best,
to
the worst.
music on Monday don't see me for 3 weeks. So
right. Well, that and like 4-day work weeks are always the most exhausting for whatever reason. Like tomorrow, I'm gonna be like,
you're gonna think
or
it's
whatever
Monday
day.
19 times.
Yes. I'll do it. It'll happen for sure.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sticking around with us. I appreciate you watching the whole entire thing. You made it to the end. This has been Ta Titi Talk, a music education podcast. I'm Tyler Swick.
And I'm Jordan Smith.
We'll see you next week.
Okay, bye.